All right. All right. Welcome, everybody. We have, not only do we have people joining us on Zoom and also on the YouTube channel, but we've also got some friends in-house. So that just took us a few minutes. Seth pulled together some things because if you come to visit, you realize that we're set up for an internet audience, and so we didn't want them to not be able to hear what some of you say, because some of you actually make the whole study worth sticking around for because your insights and observations. So what I'm going to try to do is, if they have questions, I'll help you to hear those. I'll tell you what their questions are. We'll entertain some of your questions and comments, and the whole thing today is about how can we come to a better understanding of these texts which we've all committed our lives to. So feel free to ask questions, bring up comments, and it looks like our friend Karen, straight out of the gate, walked in with her hands up. She's either Pentecostal or she's ready to share with the group. Which one is it, Karen? Both?
Oh, goodness. A little bit of both.
All right. Hallelujah. What's going on, sister?
I just want to make an observation about something that is very, there's a discussion going on in religious communities right now that goes back to what we talked about last night in Proverbs. Last night on the Shabbat
Yeah.
fellowship, we read, I can't remember what chapter it was, but we read the verse that God is no respecter of persons.
Right.
And a lot of times, I read in the biblical text and I think that that's not true. Because, it seems to be like God is very much a respecter of persons and bloodlines and family. And I'm not saying he is or isn't. I don't know.
I got you.
But, that is a very popular discussion right now I want to say like the quasi-religious podcast space.
Mm-hmm.
Is God a respecter of persons or is he not? And I just think that, maybe that's something that's being considered by other people, and maybe we should consider it too.
Yeah, it is a real good question, and it really has to do with, and I know that we'll jump in and out of this. It's probably worth doing a whole discussion where that's all we talk about, because it is a big question right now. The question comes down to, if a person is of Israelite or Jewish extraction, are they God's favorite? And I use favorite. It could be chosen. It could be the elect. However you put it, that is what is up for debate right now. I think that's cutting through the chase. Is that fairly well? Because people look at, and we've had good discussions in-house. Seth and I have had discussions, and I'm seeing the same thing on the internet, or on the interweb, as we call it, where people are saying, well, the government of Israel, that's not, and they're distinguishing between the government of Israel and the people of God in the text, and, this whole big quagmire, this big debate. Should Christians, should religious people of faith, should they support Zionism? On and on and on and on and on. And one of the things that is evident is, even if we say, so first of all, let me put the question of respecter of persons on the shelf for just a minute and talk about what people think that's talking about. And it's what I just described. Israel is chosen for a task. And, people can debate whether or not they have fulfilled that task, or are fulfilling that task, or should do better at fulfilling that task. But the people of Israel, Am Israel, descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, have always had a mission, and that is, let me put it as I can and say, it is to be a light to the nations, to teach the world of his ways. Go back all the way to Genesis 18. I know Abraham, for he will instruct his children, and they will teach the world of his ways. All right, so we all know that. That's the task. Question is, have they? And if we read the biblical text, and a lot of these popular podcasters, which quite Quite frankly, I'm at odds with some of these because they're too one-sided on it. They would say the answer to that is no, and they would give away any opportunity to be objective from their side. So, but nonetheless, I think that question is up for debate, and it's always been up for debate. I mean, throughout the biblical text, God has said, he's not been happy with the people that he chose for a certain task. And yet we have plenty of texts which say that despite the failings of his chosen people, whether that's an individual like David or a nation of people like the people of Israel, he's going to be loyal to his end of the covenant. And I think that's the main thing. Now, as far as the respecter of persons, and then I want to throw it back to you and see if you have follow-ups or things like that. But one of the things that that I think about, respecter of persons is a person or a whole people given a pass no matter what they do. And I think that is the rub. I don't think that anybody is given a total pass. They're judged. In fact, like Deuteronomy 9 says, I'm giving you this, I'm bringing you in, not because of your righteousness, And so I think that needs to be remembered. And then let me turn it back over to you and see if you have follow-ups or points that you want to zero in on. But let me just say one more thing. The respecter of persons is, again, is a person's face, to recognize the face. Does God allow a recognized face to be automatically given freedom to do whatever? And I think the answer to that is no. And I think that's evidence in the biblical text. Back at you.
Yeah, no, definitely not the freedom to do whatever.
Yeah.
I think that people are given, whether it's families or whatever, maybe, they're given a destiny, if you will. They're given a task, and it's up to them to fulfill it or not.
Yeah.
And we have to remember we're all human.
Yeah.
We're not perfect. And even if somebody has a task, maybe they're trying to fulfill, there may be other people working against them, and
right.
It's not going to be done exactly how one person or another might think it should be done. So you got to have a little bit of grace, and there's always going to be a bad apple in there trying to pollute the whole bunch.
Yep.
So, we need to look at this from a more, not everybody's a saint kind of view. Well, they did this, and well, they did, okay. There's going to be bad people in every organization. I mean, look at you talked about the stuff that happened when writing down stories about Korah today.
Yeah.
I mean, there was definitely a respecter of persons going on there, but it wasn't, that doesn't mean it, they're saying it's God. But clearly, I don't think it is.
Right.
Excuse me. So, there's going to be that kind of corruption, even if the people are they still have their purpose.
Right.
I look at my family, and I think that there was a purpose that my grandfather had an opportunity to achieve, and he didn't. My mother was given the opportunity. She didn't. And now it's kind of up to me, and it's like, well, am I going to not do it?
Yeah.
Or am I going to do it? And sometimes doing it is hard.
Right.
So we still have to look at them like they're humans. They're not saints. There's going to be bad apples, but they're still trying to do what they, fulfill their destiny, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And can it be this is something I'm taking notes while I listen to you. You always spur some thought. I've spent a lot of my adult life, my teaching years, fighting against replacement theology. So if someone, let's say we read all these texts where Israel is the firstborn, if Israel is the chosen and so forth, when I see my Christian friends and family members, and I want them to be very careful, like, I want to say, well, look, even in the New Testament, there are texts which caution against, boasting against the tree, like Romans 11, isn't it Romans 11? Your branches, you're grafted in and so forth. Be careful and don't claim I am spiritual Israel. Israel's Israel. See, one of the things that has happened in the last couple of generations is that prior to the establishment of the state of Israel, which is really at the heart of many of these discussions that you opened with, is the idea, and this is even from some Jewish groups that would challenge and say, this is not the promise of the prophets. What you see here, and people will reference Tel Aviv, and look at this is certainly not a godly representation of what God intended. In other words, there are all those. But nonetheless, it's what always comes to my mind is when God brings something about, and to thank God that God doesn't have to wait on a perfect candidate to bring it to pass. He doesn't need religious people to bring about a religious revival. He doesn't need perfect people, and that's what he said when he brought them into the land the first time. We can look at, for instance, the birth of Zionism, if you will. Let's just focus on Herzl. A lot of the religious Jews that I know even will challenge modern Zionism and the possibility that the modern state of Israel in any way ties to the biblical ideal presented by the prophets. They'll say, this guy Herzl he wasn't even religious, But I always like to think about how God will surprise humanity by choosing imperfect vessels to bring his will to pass. And so I wrote down just a couple of notes that your thoughts were making me think about. The first was, I'm going to continue to fight against replacement theology because Israel is Israel.
Right.
And now I understand that the lost tribes of Israel could be represented today in a whole different way. Somebody is going to come through Christianity and they could very well be a member of one of the tribes that's been scattered throughout all the nations, right? That's a whole nother conversation. They don't know they're Jewish. They may not have any Jewish ancestry, but they're somehow part of this group that God's calling back. Second point I have, and then I'm going to throw it out there and let other people jump in, is these come from the words of Yeshua, of Jesus, and I've always kept these at the forefront of my thinking. Before we worry about a splinter in somebody else's eyeball, we ought to get this telephone pole out of our own, get the beam out of our eye, kind of thing. I also think about one of the things that Yeshua is purportedly to have said, where God can raise up children from the stones, basically. I mean, he can do whatever he wants. And then the final point, just at least at the present, is this idea that that true circumcision, I know this can cause some people to get all excited, but true circumcision, at least according to the writing of Deuteronomy 10 and Deuteronomy 30, is of the heart. So it gives a whole new light for all my Christian friends to Romans chapter 2, verse 28 and 29. He's not just making that up. Paul isn't making that up, assuming Paul wrote Romans 2. But whoever the writer is saying, look, if you really want to know, this is what God is looking for. And then you bring in Isaiah 56. Let not the stranger say. The total stranger can achieve a place better than sons and daughters, by attaching themselves to the covenant. Anyway, just some thoughts. Back at you. Karen, are you still with me?
Well, yeah, I agree. And again, there are some, let's say, rabbis or teachers or in that, the Jewish faith who are very pro, how do I want to say it? People attaching themselves to them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They promote that, they support that, and then but there's not a lot.
Right.
So, yeah, I think again, you're gonna not everyone's the same, so you
Yeah.
can't just put a blanket statement on all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, different people have different viewpoints. That's for sure. Yeah.
So, anywho, that was just something I was thinking about when you were talking today about them excluding the sons of Korah, and it made me think about respecting, is God a respecter of persons? Isn't he? How does that work?
Yeah. No, good point. Good way to kick things off. And I think that what we ultimately see, there's a phrase, the victors write the history.
Right.
And I would, this is just me, people are welcome to challenge this, but Pauline Christianity, Paul won.
Yeah.
Pauline Christianity won. So most of, let's say, the vast majority of Christian denominations are heavily influenced, whether they know it or not, through the Pauline, at least the way Paul is understood. And I know people have worked really hard to explain Paul in a Judaic, Hebraic perspective, but let me just say it that way and carefully walk to the next point. So that's one thing. Pauline Christianity is the vast majority of the New Testament. It has influenced in ways that scholars only have noticed in the last couple of hundred years, now that we've discovered other ancient texts and groups and so forth. Well, guess what? Levitical thinking won the day in the Hebrew Bible. And some of my good friends, some of my Jewish friends who are very popular on YouTube, and, I know these guys, and they sometimes are pretty quick to point out problems in the New Testament and the Christian text. But when you show them things in the Hebrew Bible, they, la, 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 I don't see nothing. I don't hear nothing. I don't, and I'm like, you got to see it, brother. Just look, it's here too. So this whole discussion is bigger. When I look at Korah, when I see, and this is my view, from my vantage point, I see different stories. Thank God they both survived.
Yeah.
Look, I love the Bible. I don't, like, sometimes people go, well, you just throw out anything you don't agree with. I've not thrown anything out. I'm not throwing anything out. I'm challenging certain parts because I want people to see that there might be, thank God in heaven, survived pieces of evidence of these different groups that don't always agree.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I like to see it as, we're getting away from the us and them.
Yep.
You're looking at it from the outside as other. That's what I refer to myself as, is
other.
I'm other.
Yeah, I always have to check blocks. I thank God I've been rather healthy, at least as far as I know, and I've only had surgery a couple of times. And I always think, man, I know they're going to have me fill out a chart, what your religion and all that. I'm thinking, you don't have enough paper here, buddy.
Right.
I can't your block isn't big. They'll go other, explain. I'm like, yeah, right. Just settle with other. Good stuff. What else, Karen? That you did enough to stir us up, but don't stop.
No, I'm good. We'll let somebody else talk.
All right, well, jump in if you think of something else. Good to see you. All right. Clody, welcome, my friend. Shabbat shalom, sister.
Shabbat shalom.
How are you?
Let me put my video on.
There she is.
There I am.
All right.
Hi. Thank you for the class. I really think that I'm in lesser English capabilities than this class was. I believe that this, or this was really a dangerous class.
I probably just didn't explain it very well because if it, yeah. So please let's dig into what is the question because I'm here to help explain myself. That's what I need people to do is say, like you could say, I know 4 or 5 languages, Ross, and whatever you said didn't match any of those.
Ross, this was a really dangerous class.
All right, that's fair.
Because it makes. Actually, I will kick this off with Rumi's saying. This guy says that the highest scale of learning is unlearn.
Ah, okay.
So you are really making us question whatever we know, and we are unlearning whatever we knew so that we can learn the real things. And that's a really noble thing to do for us. Thank you. As for why do I say it's dangerous? I say it's dangerous because it poses a big fight or conflict in between two waves.
Mm-hmm.
One is that the chosen people from God are modest, are humble, and wonder, why did God choose me? Like Moses, Jesus, no, but Jesus actually preached about that.
Yeah.
Like the lesser will be the
Sure.
the bigger, and so on. And on the other hand, we have this other wave or current that says that some things are we are born with, we have them on our DNA, and we are chosen just because of our parents. In one of the 10 commandments, at least as the Moses scroll has them, says that if do not take God's name in vain, otherwise, because I take vengeance in the 3rd and 4th generation, says God.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, we see other verses in the Bible that say that the sons will not have their teeth, I don't remember the phrase, because of their parents' sins.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing here is that out of the whole class and the whole analysis that you did, and believe me, that was a little bit difficult, at least for me to follow. I can see how this class is, and this is ongoing now with the sources, with the Friedman entering in the way that we are studying. It makes us wonder how much the winners have written in our Bible as we have them, as we have it. And it's really difficult to part ways with things that we fell in love with.
Yeah.
But we have to really be courageous and understand that there are some big questions, just like Karen posed a very, very, very beautiful and deep question. And yeah, I think that is dangerous because it will eventually make us pose the truth, understand that we have to choose what is chosen and what is not, what is sacred and what is not. Is everybody that thinks that is a saint or a God-given teacher actually a God-given teacher? Is every book that says that we are this book is written from God a God's written book? that is, it's a chaotic mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for.
First off, I never see your thoughts as chaotic. I think they're very well explained, and I would agree. Look, when you use the word danger, I would agree with that. Here's something just so people know. Years ago, when I started seeing things in the text that challenged, that bumped up against things that I had come to believe or believed all my life, when I began to challenge way back in Christianity, I said, I feel there's a conflict between Jesus and Paul. That was dangerous. I mean, and I remember thinking, well, I'm probably just not quite understanding the nuance here, that maybe, maybe some of this, Paul is saying things that, like Peter says, he's hard to understand, but dear God, please give me grace. Let me just put that aside and go only with the words of Jesus. All right. So then, I spent some time kind of doing that for a while. And I remember thinking, ooh, now I see a little bit of danger between the words of the Gospels and the Hebrew Bible. And I feel that maybe there's some discrepancies here. Dear Lord, please don't let me pass away before I resolve this. But if I could, just let me put the New Testament on the side. Just please. And then I said, well, look, hallelujah, thank God I made it. I am now in the Hebrew Bible. The Tanakh is my only Bible. It's the holy, inspired, inerrant, authoritative Word of God. There are no errors. If I can just learn Hebrew, there are no mistakes. It's all there. And then, I started seeing more difficult things, dangerous things. Now, all along the way, there are two voices. This is just me illustrating. One voice says, Ross, don't teach that. Just don't. I mean, why would you do that? Just tell people, focus on the good things. Focus on the things, the weightier matters of the Torah. Ignore that there might be difficulties in these texts, and people will be happy. They'll love you.
The building,
yeah,
on constructing people's ways. Yeah.
Don't. Why would you?
Don't distract. Don't
tear it
distract.
down.
Yeah.
And then I get into more and more, I told people I really have spent a lot of my time over the last several years in Deuteronomy and Jeremiah. And Jeremiah has this very difficult job. Jeremiah has got to tear down and destroy and to build. And, he's got this really, really bad job. And people don't think about that. That's why we did a 25-part series on Jeremiah. But part of the message of Jeremiah is, before you can build something, you've got to do some dangerous things. And so what I like to tell people is, and I know a lot of preachers and teachers say this, but I really mean it. Blessed is the one who's not offended by me. Don't give up anything. If you're a fundamentalist Pentecostal preacher and you listen to me, keep on keeping on. Don't you dare put a thing down. Don't change your view because of my words. You maybe listen to me if you choose. And if I say something that challenges you, go do your research, decide what to do, and move forward. But I will, let me say it very calmly and very nicely, I will not. I can't. If it's just me talking to just me, and Seth, as long as he sticks around, if that's it, that's what it's going to be. I gave up everything. You cannot, I hope you understand this, you cannot, unless God does something I don't see him doing right now, you can't become popular among the teachers unless you give people, spoon feed them, part the whiskers, feed them their baby food in things that make them happy anyway. Old Testament, New Testament, both say that. I'm literally scratching those ears. People love that. I love the passage in Ezekiel 33 for obvious reasons where Ezekiel looks out and he says, you know what? Here's what people say. I'm paraphrasing. I'm making Ezekiel modern. He says, I'm going to log in. This is what Ezekiel says. People are saying, I'm going to log in and listen to what Ezekiel says. He sings such sweet songs. And then they go away and they don't change.
That's true.
People listen and it's a challenge to them, but you know what they do? They say, that's too far. It's too scary. It's too this or too that. I just wanted to say, this is the end of it, but I just wanted to say, I know that some of this is troubling. I had people call me and write me and email me and Facebook message me and WhatsApp me and say, why, Ross? Why would you challenge us in this? Just leave it alone. I can't. Anyway.
Yeah, we have to have those. Yeah, we have to dig and to make a strong building. If we continue with the already destroyed building, it's gonna tumble down. So we have to tear it apart and build a new one. I wanted also to make a small parallel on where I come from and where I am at.
Good.
I come from Albania, which is a really small nation. We are altogether in the world like 5 million people in the whole world, maximum. And I lived for part of my childhood in Greece, and they are also a small nation, Greek people. And then as I was growing up, I understood that these were two little nations, small nations. If we compare them to China, if we compare them to India, if we compare them to United States. And here I come on my 40s in the United States, and I see that it's easier for people that are part of wider nations to accept that more than two are chosen. It's really difficult. You cannot imagine what kind of difference it makes to smaller nations to think that they are the best of the elite, I mean.
The best
Like,
of the what? I'm sorry, say that again.
The elite.
Oh, okay,
elite.
okay, I got you. Yeah, yeah.
So it was really, it was part of my energy source in Albania to think that I am one of the elites there. It was really something that made my day every day, and that, of course, you understand that I'm not boasting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make a point. While here in America, you see that people, and what I mean by that is the I don't remember the word. I have to check that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. What do you have there? A little sneaky dictionary that helps you navigate four languages?
Yep. Competition. That was the word, competition. Yep. So it's really difficult for people in smaller nations or smaller communities to accept competition. While when you are in a big, vast community, you understand that there is competition and there is place for everybody that wants to become better. And what I mean by that is that perhaps this is a generation now that is different from many, many years ago, because we are, and I think that this is part of God's plan, because we are becoming a wide global community.
Yep.
And we understand that God loves everybody, not everybody's actions, everybody. And I think that God can act through the most modest and humble people, not the ones that boast on their false history, because that's important. The winners really have given us false histories. That is all. I didn't want to go this far.
we have to be discerning, and we have to challenge, and we have to look at the whole story. I was in Israel in a conference room in a seating area in a hotel. We were on tour, and a woman just really broke down. She opened up to a whole group of people. We barely knew one another, but she was just very emotional. And she said that her whole life, I'm going to do this the best justice I can, but her whole life was trying to serve God and following the God of the Bible. And she realized that her faith contradicted the biblical text in some ways. And so she was willing to give that up, and she's bawling. And, everybody in the room that had a heart was crying with her. She just really, really, because it was her heart she was speaking. It was raw. It was a raw moment. And she was telling everybody that, I've lost everything. I've lost my friends. I left my church. I left my this. I can't do the holidays with my family. I own and own and own and own and own. And a rabbi said, well, I'm glad I grew up with the truth. And I was floored. It was the example, it was the epitome of tone deaf. And I called it out. I said, how dare you? You think that you've got it all figured out? That it blew me away. That was one of the turning points in my life. And I'm glad it happened. It reminded me of It reminded me of a parable of two people who went in the temple to pray. And one of them, I think it's Luke 18, I'm not sure, said something like, thank God I'm not like this guy, this wicked sinner over here. Whoo, thank God I'm a righteous whatever. And the other guy, we get the benefit of both. It's a story, it's a parable. Is it true? I don't know. Maybe Jesus actually saw this happen. But this other person was beating their chest, wouldn't even look up, and said, God, forgive me, a sinner. To me, it comes down to God can see past all the textual difficulties, all the genealogical tables, people who claim nothing will touch me because I'm holier than thou. I'm from a long line of priests or whatever. And God can find that one righteous person, no matter who they are, no matter where they are, who has a heart after him. I think that's the main thing. Some of those are people to whom the task was given in the first place. Some of them are Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox rabbis or members of the IDF or who knows. But some of them are also Palestinian Christians or Pentecostals in Mississippi or, a Catholic nun who's given up her whole life to feed the people of Calcutta and nurse their leprosy.
Or an agnostic. I would say an agnostic.
An agnostic, someone who just does not know, but seeking to do the right thing. I think that what we've got to realize, look, I'm a Bible guy. I love the Bible. I'm in the text every day of my life. I wake up, I think, oh man, I dreamed that. Okay, what does that mean? It's Isaiah, it's this, it's that, whatever. But when I go out to my little small town and I encounter someone at a restaurant, how do I treat them? I don't walk in and go, excuse me, dear sir, are you familiar with the contextual difficulties between the Kohathites and who cares? I mean, I remember being challenged. I've been challenged a lot by my mother, who says things and has my whole life. Like, what difference does it make if you can read? She said it a lot nicer than I'm saying it, but here, who cares if you can read Hebrew and Greek? And how do you treat your family? How do you treat your neighbors? How do you, I mean, really, when it comes down to it, what's God really looking for? Am I going to somehow enter into heaven, whatever that looks like, because I authored a book or learned a language or know some Hebrew vocabulary? Who cares? Who cares?
Yep.
So there's two
I think
sides of
in a
this. I
world,
want to dig into the text, but I also want to learn to be a better person and honor
using
God.
the text,
Yeah,
using the
yeah.
text.
Hopefully so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah,
But
that would be.
one more point though. It is at times difficult, but when we look at text like Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 8, Jeremiah, something happened. In Jeremiah's time, in his day, and we know this happened, by the way, from Kings and Chronicles, we know that the real scroll of Moses was found. And Jeremiah says, when your words were found, I ate them. He digested the real truth. And you know what? One of the things that he said that has punched me in the face, like almost literally, made me take back and think. Who are we to say that we are wise and the Torah of the Lord is with us when the lying pen of the scribes has made it a lie? Meanwhile, I have Messianic teachers, I have Messianic rabbis, I have Orthodox rabbis, I have Christian teachers saying, this is the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. It's the inerrant, inspired, authoritative, on and on and on and on and on. And I have Jeremiah saying, no, it didn't. How is it? Why would we not at least look closely and say, do we have differences here? If God needs a temple, where is it? And you go, well, it's going to be rebuilt. Read Ezekiel 40 through 48. But it's not here yet, right? Where are the sacrifices? Does God need sacrifices or does he not? He says, if I were hungry, I wouldn't get you to feed me.
That's a fundamentalist point of view, Ross. I'm sorry I'm interrupting. And that is what makes people hate each other. If you are a fundamentalist, you are going to hate anybody that doesn't think like you. And I think that's the point of our whole period of time. I believe that that's the point. We have to understand that we cannot be fundamentalists because that's how much we can see and understand during this time.
Yep.
The sooner we understand that there is not the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me, Lord.
Yep.
As soon as we understand that, we will love our brother in our heart. We will not hate our brother in our heart.
Amen.
And fundamentalism brings fundamentalism. If you hear what Muslims say about their Quran, is the same thing. They say that it's the truth and nothing but the truth, and they even think they say that was written by Muhammad's followers.
Yep.
And they remembered it by heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like, okay, I understand that you might have some people that remember a lot by heart.
Yeah.
But come on.
Yeah.
Come on. So fundamentalism, I think it's the root to hatred.
Amen.
And what you are doing is dangerous, but in the same time is very, very important and critical to our time.
It's not popular, and I get that, but what I hope that people understand is that my little class is just a piece of this. It's the tip of the iceberg. What I really have always wanted, I can look back from the first time in the early 2000s when I started teaching publicly. The whole point, I did an after-class discussion. And these got hard sometimes. People, no, Ross, you're wrong. I mean, we got into a lot of debates and discussions, but here's what I see. What do you see? And the beauty of what we do on Saturday mornings is not to be described as, well, Ross talks for an hour and 15 minutes. It's Ross talks for an hour and 15 minutes, and then we get together and talk for a couple of hours, and people bring up their concerns, their challenges, their opinions, because this is what matters. Look, if I say something and this is what I see, I know that other people would say, but hang on, Ross. We know this, and here's what this rabbi said. I know there are other views. That's what this is for. But I'm with you. Fundamentalism is a problem, and I have been so many different kinds of fundamentalist. Man, I'm telling you.
Me too. That's how we know.
Yeah, I know. It's like a smoker. We know when we quit tobacco what it's like to be somebody in that camp. I'm telling you, I have fought people over when the rapture is. I've fought people over, the moon, when the month begins. I've fought people over the calendar and the festivals and the name of Jesus and the name of God, whether it's Jehovah or Yahweh or Yehovah or Yahuwah. I've been in every one of those and have been dead-gum good at every position I held. I believed that you could baptize only in the name of Jesus, and by God, that's the way I did it. And I've been baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And if you didn't do it that way, you were wrong. I've been everything. God, I almost feel like Paul. I've been all things to all men. I'm telling you, if it's out there, I've been there and got the T-shirt. By the way, it's a good T-shirt, this one here. Mine. But you're right. How do we push past that and say, look, we all love and have loved these biblical texts, and let's be honest with them. Let's look at them. No one is going to argue that every word in the book of Job is profitable for your religious belief, because you got some people that present to Job arguments that God later says aren't true, but that's in the Bible. We know that, but yet when I say, well, could it be that we've got these other stories mixed in? Could it be when Jeremiah says that the lying pen made the Torah a lie, is he lying?
Yeah.
I don't think he is. Yep. I think we have to be discerning, we have to pray, and we have to ask some very hard questions. If there's supposed to be a temple and priesthood and sacrifices, and it hadn't been for 2,000 years, could it be that God has actually put his stamp of approval on a way that is different than that? Could be. But that's just my view.
And by the way, splitting hairs in Albanian is a saying that we use like sorting rice.
Yeah. You know, in English, we say if you're splitting hairs, you're really getting picky here. You're taking a hair. How big is a hair? And you're just splitting the hair. So I titled it that. I told Seth, he probably doesn't think they're as good as I. Sometimes I'll say, oh man, that's a good title. And but it because I knew that this class in particular would be digging deep in something that some people might say, come on, man, you're like Jesus said, you strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. That's splitting hairs. But could it be that some of these points are really important to figure out? I think maybe. I think it's a big deal. If later it became established that if you are not a descendant of the sons of Aaron, you cannot be a priest. But if that wasn't the case all along, what if that group put the silence on anyone else, like a priestly mafia? By the way, read Josephus, and you know what you'll find? That's exactly what they were dealing with. Or forget Josephus. Read the Bible. What do we read about in First Kings, Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles, what do we read about? The religious leaders. When I did the study on Jeremiah, and we talk about how a certain king would raise up, and a prophet prophesied against him, and then ran to I started to say England, ran to Egypt because he's scared he's going to get killed. Guess what? This wicked king fetches him from Egypt, brings him back, and kills him with the sword.
Yes. Yes.
And we have record of that in the biblical text. So when people tell me, "Oh, Ross, your view of the biblical stories is a little bit," what? Have you read the Bible? This is what I want to say. Read Kings, read Chronicles, read them side by side. Get the book by Newsom. It's on my website. If you don't have that book in your library, and you don't have the money, I don't have a lot of money, but write me and let me try to help you get it. I'll get somebody with money to help me fund you to get that book. It's one of the greatest books in my library. A Synoptic Harmony of Kings and Chronicles, or whatever the title is, by Newsom. I mean, it's that important, because what you see then is you see Kings and Chronicles, or Samuel sometimes, will tell the same story, but they have alternative facts. They're different.
And they have different point of views and different agendas.
Yeah,
that's
when you look at them side by side and you realize King David, in Samuel, it tells the story about David had reached the place in his life where he's not going off to war anymore. He stays behind. And then what does Samuel tell us? The story we all know. He looks out his window, sees Bathsheba bathing on her roof, takes her, commits adultery with her, gets her pregnant, has her husband killed, all of that. And then the story picks up. You know what it does in Chronicles? It leaves every bit of that out. Every bit of that. Go look at it. It tells the story about the warfare that's going to happen and how King David stayed behind. Nothing about Bathsheba, nothing about naked women on the roof, nothing, none. And then at the end of it, it goes, anyway, so like I was saying, it just skips it, because there is an agenda in these biblical writers at times. We're reading history live and raw. You know the arguments that we see today on CNN and Fox? We see the same ones in the Bible.
Yep.
We see those different views. We have some that think the king is wicked as hell, forgive my French, and we have others that exonerate him of all bad. I'm telling you, if anybody reads the Bible honestly, they see that this is the most incredible book ever written, because it allows us to look into the history of the day. The book of Chronicles is called Divrei Hayamim, the words of the days. This is the stories. Fun stuff. Anyway, you got me all pumped up, Clody.
Oh, no, it was Karen's fault.
Well, yeah, Karen did it too. It's all it's all y'all ladies. This is why, now this is going to be, now I'm not going to say it. I started to say, this is why women aren't supposed to talk in church. You know, that's a joke. Everybody that knows me knows that's a joke. They stir up too much trouble. Keep stirring up trouble, Karen and Clody. You're doing good.
Thank you.
All right, Todd and Angel, come back when you think of more good stuff. Hey, Todd and Angel, how are you? Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Help me out of this trouble I got into. What else you got?
No, I'm going to take
You're
over
gonna
while
pile it on.
I'm going to take over while you're all pumped up.
Oh, let me stretch. I'm
So
ready.
I got some interesting questions from your teaching. You first part of the class you read about how Israel was holy. And first thing that pops in my,
Todd, hold that thought. 1 second. Hold that thought.
Okay.
Todd, I'm sorry. I'm ready. I'm ready
All
now.
Right. Test. We good?
Test, we're back.
Like you said, when you were reading in Numbers about how Israel was holy.
Yep.
First thing that pops in my head was, if Israel is chosen to be the holy people,
Mm-hmm.
as far as the righteous and the holy and everything, then why is there a separated tribe, the Levites, considered to be priests? Why is there a certain tribe considered to be above the rest of them?
Certainly is the question being asked, who is it that is to teach the rest, you know? And of course, the biblical answer, as you know, I know you know because I've talked to you plenty, it's you got the priestly nation. Everybody is a priest. Everyone is holy. This is a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So the whole thing, you're all a priest, you're all holy. And then within that group, you've got the teachers of the teachers. You have the priest, the Levitical priest, who are the ones who are to teach the rest of this group, who are then to teach the world. So it's kind of it's like one of those nesting dolls. You have, you know, ultimately, this is the goal. You have a holy nation. Oh, you open it up, you got a holy tribe within the holy, and then, oh, you open it up, and you have a holy of holies, and that's the idea. So what I wanted to do today was get at the question, well, who is that? Where does the thing start? Where does it start to where who's the priest of the priest?
Well, not only that, but like you just said, who is to teach them? But at the same time, if everybody was at the mount when the commandments were given, then everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah.
Who's to teach them? And especially when it says, I gave 10 and no more.
Yeah.
But for them to be the holy chosen people, it seems like you're sowing in discord, basically, of creating people within that group to be the most holy.
Yeah.
It can only approach him.
And others to be less than.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that to me is more of a priestly source type of thing than anything.
Well, you know, one thing that happens in religions, I mean, it happens almost in any and every religion. You have a group of people who come together and their goal is to draw nearer to God, you know, like, let's do this as a group. And then somebody goes, well, I'll head that up. You know, and I'm not making fun, but bear with me. It might be that someone says, well, God spoke to me and said that I'm in charge. And what that means to you is that you give me some of your money, and you know, and I'll do this, and you give me the best choice cuts of meat, and you give me, you know, and what I'll give you is some good instruction, good and wholesome instruction. So we get this repeated over and over in history, and if you really read, you know, the bare bones. What if God does give these 10 words, and the 10 words govern our interaction with other people and with God? What if it's that simple? I mean, to me, that's what really, really is something that makes me think, gives me pause. And then, but over time, if anyone who reads the Bible sees that you have the leaders of the state, the political and religious leaders have always, through their own desire to rule over others, have always been the problem. I mean, I tell people all the time, the first time we meet with the word king, I'm not talking about Deuteronomy, we'll talk about that separately, but outside of the Pentateuch, we meet with the word king or rule in Judges chapter 9, I think, where it's this parable of the trees. And, you know, the different trees are asked, you be king over us. And one after another, they said, no, I'm not leaving, like the olive branch says, I'm not leaving my oil. This tree says, I'm not leaving the grapevine says, I'm not leaving. Oh, no. But you get to the bramble, the thorn, and he goes, if you want a ruler, I'll do it. Well, that's what's happened, is people have usurped God's interaction with people and claim certain leadership that may or may not. Now, I think that there is a reason that you would have certain people help guide others, but at the same time, you got to be careful. It is a dangerous, slippery slope.
Oh, the slippery slope fallacy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
But it's no different. By what you just said about the priesthood, it's no different than what preachers do today. They're paid to say what they say.
Yeah. And by the way, they're not paid if they say something that people don't like. So the beauty of Seth has helped, like when we design, Seth designed the website, my Ross K. Nichols site, and it says independent in big words, big letters. And the reason it's independent, and the reason I like that word and we use that word is, for better or for worse, I don't have anybody telling me what I can and can't say. You know what? You know how that happens in our world? It happens when somebody says, I'm not listening to you anymore. And if they're on an Apple device, they click the red dot in the upper left. And if they're on a PC, they click the X in the upper right. And they say, I don't want to be around you anymore. I don't want to listen to you anymore. And believe me, they tell me that. Or if they were donating to help cover the costs that we have, they just say, I'm not doing that anymore. Or they just go away. But no one, thank God, no one has the authority to tell me what I can and can't say other than God. And
yeah, our last preacher basically said that there was a group of men at the church that basically ran everything.
Yeah.
And he says, I have to say what they want to hear.
Yeah.
Which is why he repeats the same thing every freaking week.
Yeah.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the priesthood was one serious power to go through all those centuries.
And it makes you wonder if that's not why it's not functioning today. Anyone who reads Kings and Chronicles, I'm telling you, I just don't see how you can come away with that and say, well, it was really okay. It was just, just had a bunch of bad luck. What God, when the people say we want a king like the nations, 1 Samuel chapter 8, we want a king like the nations. Samuel, I've said this 100 times. This would be 101 probably. Samuel doesn't say, oh, I knew this day was coming because of Deuteronomy 17. He's never heard of this idea. He's never heard of this. He tells God, they requested a king like the nations. God doesn't say, well, Samuel, I don't know why you're all up in a tiffy. We knew this was going to happen because of Deuteronomy 17. He doesn't even mention it. What God says is they hadn't rejected you. They rejected me. The request for a monarch. Now think about how much of the Bible has to do with the monarchy. If you're telling me that was inserted later, that kind of makes me pause. Like, what? Well, look at all the kings. How many of them were good and righteous? Were any of them? Yeah, you get a couple that were decent. Some, and of course, you don't expect perfection. They're humans like us. Mm-hmm. But the monarchy, you kidding me? The monarchy is not really God's idea. All right. Well, we can talk about Deuteronomy 17 more if people want to do that, because I'm happy to look at that and show you where it came from. But you got that, and then you go, well, what about the priesthood? Is there supposed to be a specific group? Were the Levites that group? And if they were the Levites, then were they just the sons of Aaron? And why do we have these other groups that show up in other texts? Feels like there's a little bit of a debate going on as to who actually was to be in charge, like different schools of thought.
Well, not to mention, but I also notice there's a repetitive pattern too, that no matter who was king or no matter who was in control via the Romans or whatever, the priesthood always had their own thing. Yeah. It didn't answer to anybody.
That's right.
And that's fascinating to me. And it's, you could have, all the kings that were mentioned in the Tanakh, and the priesthood still did what they wanted to do. You had the Romans in the New Testament; they still did what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, they even admitted we have our own law,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not. What was it? They told Pilate, says, according to our law, we can't kill anybody. Well, what law are you reading? I mean, aren't you supposed to stone people but you're not supposed to kill people?
Well, that goes back to what they were planning to do to Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to kill him. And that was because he didn't violate the Torah.
A lot of people have heard me hint at this, and I don't know how it's going to come about or when I'm going to do it, but one of the things that I think about, I've mentioned, is I'm considering doing somehow, some way, don't know when, don't know if it's a Saturday morning study, don't know what, but I'm going to go through, I'd like to go through, God willing, the gospel text again and look at them very closely, compare and contrast. And what does this gospel say versus the Hebrew Bible versus this other gospel? And part of the reason I'm going to do that is because years ago I shelved it because I bought into, this has difficulties and discrepant variations, and the Hebrew Bible doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all this new journey has done for me is say, well, hang on just a second. What I put on the shelf has some difficulties and some opportunities and some variations. Maybe I need to get that off of the shelf and look at it again with a fresh set of eyes. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's like I told you several times that we're the flip-flop opposite of that. By questioning what's in the New Testament has opened our eyes to what you're referring to in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Because if we're accepting the fact that, okay, Paul was a menace, if you can accept that fact and that he's a false teacher, it opens your eyes to other things in the gospel that don't align because they've been influenced by Paul.
Yeah.
But if you can accept that, which the church refuses you to do so, if you can accept that, then that really opens your eyes to what you're teaching of, that doesn't make sense. I mean, as far as like with the sacrifices and the priesthood and everything else, we never even thought about that stuff while we were questioning Paul.
Yeah, I didn't either. No, I didn't either.
Yeah, so it doesn't even enter our minds. But by questioning that and then learning more of who Yeshua really is, now we can carry that over and go, you know what? That in the Old Testament doesn't make sense either.
You think maybe we should I'm going back to Clody's comment, you think maybe we should put a label on our videos that call them dangerous? Get a danger label? That might be good. Yeah.
Like warning, this series may cause you to think.
The first, I'm going to tell my YouTube audience goodbye in a moment, but I'll tell you when we first started going on Apple Podcast years and years ago, I was so excited because I saw that I had a comment, and the first comment that a listener posted was, "Beware, this guy is not a Christian." and the second comment was, "Beware, this guy's not Jewish." And I wrote the third comment and I said, "You've hit it dead on. I'm not claiming to be any of that. I'm just saying this is the Bible. I'm seeking the God of truth and truth from the God of truth, and and so forth." But I like that idea. It's like, look, if it goes back to the fundamentalism point that Clody had, if you're going to latch on to certain fundamentals, you're going to find somebody to disagree with. And I'm not saying that's bad, but let's go to the text and let's look internally at the text. That's what we're here for. All right, so hold on, Todd. Our YouTube audience, you've been patient. You've dealt with us all this time. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope that you're here every time we go live. What we're going to do is you feel free, by the way, if you're part of the Yachad, to join us in the Zoom call because we're going to hang around for a little while. We still got a little bit of time left. And so don't go away. Just join us on the Zoom. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov.